Good morning, everyone. Good morning, distinguished delegates, honorable guests, and everyone joining us live from YouTube. Welcome to the talk show session on the art of diplomacy and negotiation. I hope you are ready to kickstart the second day at the 6th ASEAN Foundation Model ASEAN meeting. We are very delighted to have with us here today Ambassador Noel Servigon. Ambassador Noel is a career Foreign Service officer of the Republic of the Philippines. He joined the Department of Foreign Affairs in 1988. His diplomatic postings were in Vienna, Austria, as second and third secretary, vice consul and consul, and alternate representative to the International Atomic Energy Agency, in Ankara, Turkey, as first secretary and consul, in The Hague, Netherlands, as first secretary, forgive me, in The Hague, Netherlands, as first secretary consul and deputy permanent representative to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, as minister and consul general, in Manado, Indonesia, as chief of mission and consul general, in Hong Kong as chief of mission and consul general, and in Hanoi as the Philippine ambassador to the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. On 8 May 2019, just last year, he assumed his position as ambassador and permanent representative of the Philippines to ASEAN. Ambassador Noel, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this talk show online. I am sure we are all looking forward and very excited to your presentation on the tips and tricks of negotiation in this era. So without further ado, please, you may take the floor.
Good morning, citizens of ASEAN. Hello. I am happy to interact with you this morning and to share with you my experiences as a career diplomat. At the outset, although I was asked to speak on the art of diplomacy in negotiation, and just a few minutes before, the MC said the tricks and tips of diplomacy. It is not my intention to give you a textbook style of lecture on this subject. Rather, I would like to share some experiences that would provoke you to ponder about the work of diplomats. You know, at first I thought that I should use the traditional slides, but I realized that there is a more interactive way to convey my message to you through your own individual memory and imagination. I really hope that you would make use later of our question and answer time so that this event would be more productive. Okay? The model ASEAN meeting is supposed to be a simulation of ASEAN meetings. I am sure that you have photos or videos of diplomatic meetings, or you have observed personally, or even participated as a delegate or a conference staff in these meetings. Can you remember any experience? Can you think about it now? Participants, ASEAN citizens, please think of it now. When was the last time that you have seen or you have participated in a diplomatic meeting? Okay? But this year's version is more than just the usual simulation. You are also simulating the new mode of ASEAN meetings, the virtual meetings. So here we are this morning. Friends, I hope that this is interactive and I could hear from you later. I'm looking at the gallery and I could see four screens, four sets of participants. So now my message for all of you, my short message for all of you. When I first joined the Philippine Foreign Service in 1988, I was told that one of the innovative training programs being introduced by our new foreign minister was about grassroots diplomacy. Grassroots diplomacy. The program was for senior diplomats with the purpose of reconnecting them to the people whom they are supposed to represent. I still remember asking why we, the then young recruits, were not part of the program. The answer was that the prevailing sentiment was that the senior diplomats who may have been away from the country for a long time, during that time, the regular tour of duty abroad for Filipino diplomats was 8 long years, may need to reconnect with the ground. This is the first point of my message. You, the young people, are from the grassroots, the basic sectors of society, the youth, students, and the young workers. Throughout my career, I have always been guided by that message. Always consider your grassroots. Always be guided by the needs of the people you represent. Although we diplomats are not politicians, we should always use our own experiences in connecting with the grassroots communities in order to recommend policies to our decision makers. I assume that many of you are interested in diplomacy, even perhaps becoming one yourself, which is why you are eager to join the AFMAM. Some of you may have relatives, friends, and acquaintances who are diplomats. Please think about it. Think about a relative, a neighbor, a colleague who is a diplomat, even if he or she does not know you. Try to picture them now. Okay? Can you recall someone? Do you know someone? Try to picture them now. For those people who have known diplomats, I am sure that there would be very many impressions of what being a diplomat actually entails. My friends, I'm sure that you have seen that meme circulated in the internet about what a diplomat actually does. Can you check it in your cell phones? Have you seen that meme? They are like, it could be very funny or amusing. What a diplomat actually does. Have you seen them? If not,
Ambassador Noel, if I could just step in for a moment, I would just like to point out to the delegates that if you want to respond directly to the ambassador or if you have questions, please raise your hands and we will unmute you to be able to speak with the ambassador. Thank you.
I invite you to Google it. What sometimes gets lost in these varying perspectives is the core of diplomacy, which is public service. I'm very happy that I am paired with my good friend Mr. Lee Yong Yong, Director for Community Relations of the ASEAN Secretariat, who will be your speaker after me. You know, I'm always elated to engage in the various public diplomacy activities that he and his colleagues in the ASEAN Secretariat may have come up with. Public diplomacy is all about engaging all the stakeholders, that includes you, to get their views, their ideas, and their personal commitment to help ensure that we are all on the same page, moving towards the same goals. Now we come to my second point. Diplomats contribute in making policy, either bilaterally multilaterally, or domestically. In ASEAN, we do this through identifying problems, which would lead to the floating of concept papers containing possible solutions, which would evolve into joint statements or agreements, and which would eventually emerge into concrete activities or projects. It's quite a mouthful. It's a series of steps. Usually, some ASEAN member states have favorite subjects to pursue. Each member state champions certain issues and is most evident during its turn to be ASEAN chairman, a once every 10 years opportunity. I remember that before the Philippines became ASEAN chair in 2017, there was a series of workshops across all sectors that aim to conceive initiatives geared towards serving our priorities in ASEAN. In pursuing our policy objectives in ASEAN, we have a different way of making decisions. I'm sure that most of you are members, or at least are familiar with organizations or institutions where the parliamentary rule of the majority is observed when making a decision. I ask you again, my friends, participants, try to recall a time when you participated in a body that made a decision. Are you recalling it? Are you thinking about it? It might be a family council, a student organization, a hobby club, a business group, or even a conjugal partnership. In ASEAN, we have a different case. You should be aware about the term consensus. Consensus is a sacred doctrine enshrined in the ASEAN Charter. It requires that all ASEAN member states should agree on any course of action, or at least there should be no single objection by any member state. This means that ASEAN diplomats must choose subjects of undertaking which could be acceptable to all member states. This is also your challenge in the model ASEAN meetings. Bear in mind that one of the principles of ASEAN as enshrined in the ASEAN Charter is respect for the different cultures, languages, and religions of the peoples of ASEAN while emphasizing their common values in the spirit of unity in diversity. Now we come to my last point. I would like to speak about the new normal in multilateral diplomacy. The virtual meetings. Actually, this online arrangement was conceived by ASEAN several years ago when ASEAN national secretariats in the capitals of ASEAN member states were requested to install video conferencing facilities. Before this unfortunate COVID-19 pandemic, ASEAN's various sectors across multiple levels would hold over 1,000, I repeat, over 1,000 meetings annually. Now, most of all these meetings have gone online. Allow me to divide my last point into two sub-points. First, many diplomats would prefer to interact in person with their counterparts face to face rather than to communicate in writing. I think that the main reason is that the speaker may feel that the message could be imparted more effectively through physical proceedings with all the facial expressions, right? With all the facial expressions and accompanying vocal sounds. Vocal sounds. Try to think about this. Would you find it better to look and listen to me than to read my message in an email or in a piece of paper? What do you think? Which is better? For me, and especially with the increase of the online meetings, I prefer that the message be circulated in advance so that during the video conference, the other side could follow carefully and would not miss any portion of the message. The important part there is the other side would not miss any portion of my message. Speaking about it, I would like to come to the second sub point of my last point. Although the present level of technology has allowed the virtual meetings like this, there are still several factors that restrict this medium. I'm sure you know about that. That is the reliability of the internet connection of the participants. Just looking at the screen now, I could see that only a few have live video connections with me. Perhaps this may be due to the internet capability in other places. You know, we have experienced several interruptions in our meetings, and they could even happen during critical points in the conversation. You could just imagine how we scramble, how we panic to reconnect or to find another connection just to keep the momentum alive. I hope that you will not experience it during your meetings later. Another aspect of this point is about cybersecurity. A new word has been coined, the Zoom bomber. Zoom bomber. This is a top concern of our officials. Otherwise, some would rather wait for actual face-to-face opportunities in order to send or to convey confidential messages or to discuss sensitive issues. Now, ladies and gentlemen, ASEAN citizens, my friends, can you remember the 3 points I have mentioned earlier? Remember them again. Those are just 3 points. As I have said earlier, I do not want to have a textbook lecture about the art of diplomacy. So to recap, my main points are: number one, public diplomacy, which is diplomacy from the grassroots, diplomacy from your communities. Second, participation in policy making. And third, the new normal in diplomacy. Now, my friends, use your imagination again on how you would consider those points in your simulation as an ASEAN diplomat. I am sure that you would have questions and be ready with them now. Fellow ASEAN citizens, I was a teacher before I became a diplomat. And one of my favorite subjects was diplomatic practice, which would take at least 3 months in class sessions, 3 hours a week. Now I have attempted to squeeze or compress my course lecture into barely 10 minutes. Remember what I told you at the very start of my talk. I would like to provoke you to consider for yourself what kind of diplomacy you would like to practice. I did not intend to cover all your expectations. So I allotted a longer time for our question and answer portion. Before I end, I would like to share with you two provisions of the ASEAN Charter. Actually, they are in the article on the purposes of ASEAN. And I would like to quote them. To promote a people-oriented ASEAN in which all sectors of society are encouraged to participate in and benefit from the process of ASEAN integration and community building. And the second purpose, which I would like to quote, to promote an ASEAN identity through the fostering of greater awareness of the diverse culture and heritage of the region. Fellow ASEAN citizens, I am now ready to listen to your comments and to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Noel. That was some really great, key points from you. And I think we all kind of have an idea of what it is like in the current new normal, as you said. So maybe I could start off with a question because I don't see that anyone has any questions yet in the chat box. So I have a question myself. From the first point that you mentioned about public diplomacy, and you said it starts off from a grassroots level. So, basing off that, I would like to ask, we live like in a world of differences. Every day we face individuals, groups, opinions, intentions, interests, and values that are different from our own, and that could kind of catalyze confrontations and conflicts. So, how can we maintain that sort of peaceful and balanced relations with others? Or, in other words, how do we master the art of everyday diplomacy that can later on be applied on like a national and regional or international level, even? So, if you have some ideas on that, please share.
Thank you for that question, because that would lead me to another aspect of diplomacy of which I have been involved so much in my career. It's not about multilateral diplomacy. It's about consular and public diplomacy. That means that as diplomats representing our country abroad, our work is not limited to our office time. I started as a vice consul in Vienna, Austria, became a consul and a consul general. My last posting as consul general was in Hong Kong, and you can imagine how busy I was during that time. Busy in interacting with the public, busy in trying to anticipate any contingency that would happen. So, unlike in some meetings where there is a time for you to end your participation, a time for you to prepare, and there would be a time for you to switch off your involvement. In some aspects of diplomacy, particularly in consular diplomacy, work is 24/7. And as my family would have noticed, it could be even not only 24/7, but 30/10. It's just not enough. Yeah, I hope that I have answered your question.
Yes, I mean, like, I know that a diplomatic position is definitely very demanding and it can sort of eat into your private life as well. So I guess the next question I would have is like, how do you manage to find a balance between managing like your private life and then your public life? Because I'm sure that's something like for people who want to kind of break into this so-called diplomacy industry, that's something that is always kind of at the back of their mind. So do you have any advice for that, perhaps?
My sons always call me an accidental diplomat. I don't know where they got that impression. As I have said before, I was a teacher. Then I studied law, but God has other plans for me. I, while a law student, I was looking for a part-time job, and I took the exams for the Foreign Service, and I passed it before I passed the bar. And after the exams, I had already a job waiting for me at our foreign ministry. My parents never imagined that I would be a diplomat working around the world. On hindsight, I also could not remember imagining myself when I was young that I would be a diplomat. But such is life. We could not really anticipate or foretell accurately our future. So concerning your question about family, yes, it was a difficult process, and until now, I always think about it. What could have happened to me and my family if I did not continue my career as a diplomat? What would happen to my children? We have only two sons. They're both adults now. But I think it's really a challenge for diplomats and for overseas workers, especially for those who are transferring from one place to another. My position now, my post now in Jakarta is my eighth station in my over 30 years of service. Just transferring from one place to another affected so much the stability of my family. But with God's grace, we were able to survive. And my wife and I are here now in Jakarta. My two sons have finished their university, now trying to find themselves their places amidst this COVID pandemic. You would need a separate session if you would like to discuss family life. My wife has spoken about it in many occasions, and I could imagine the interest made by some young people about lives of diplomatic families. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you, Ambassador Noel. That was some real insight into, what diplomats don't really talk about, which I'm sure can be very useful to future diplomats out there. So we have some questions I see on the chat box, and they are both related to languages. So one is asking about the fact that language is the essence of diplomacy, and how do you think ASEAN might move forward in incorporating the diversity of all the languages across the ASEAN region? And following that, another person also asked how important it is to have a talent for languages if you want to pursue a diplomatic career. So, what do you think about languages, Ambassador Noel?
A very interesting question because yesterday we had a meeting with other ASEAN ambassadors discussing a draft document. And we felt that we are lucky here in ASEAN that from the very start in 1967, we have decided that English will be the language of ASEAN. I have worked in meetings of the United Nations and in other international organizations. And you could just imagine how difficult it is to communicate if other diplomats would use another language. The difficulty lies in ensuring that the language we use would have the same meaning as their understanding in their own language. So it is indeed an asset if a diplomat is familiar with other languages, especially in bilateral diplomacy, when you would be needing to understand the language of your counterpart. For me, I have tried my best to study the languages of the countries in which I have been posted. My first posting was Vienna, Austria. That is a German language city. And naturally, I had to study it. It was a continuous study until such time that I could be able to understand and make reports from reading the newspaper, which is in German. By the time I finished my term there, I was even trying to understand the rules and regulations of the country in their language. So I think that a facility for foreign language would be a very good asset for any diplomat. Here in ASEAN, many countries, if not the majority, have people who understand another local language, which is Bahasa. I was posted here in Indonesia, in Manado, 10 years ago. And I have also tried to learn the Bahasa Indonesia, which when I returned here last year became useful. My eldest son also found it that he could still remember his Bahasa. And when he visited us here, he actually became the interpreter of my wife whenever they were going around. But in ASEAN, we still use only a single language, which is English. And for some countries in which English is also an official language, it would be an advantage. I hope I have answered your question.
All right, thank you for that. I think we can all agree that having the capacity to speak more than one language can be very useful in not only like the diplomatic scene, but also in connecting with people on a more personal level. So I saw a hand that was raised just now, and I would like to call upon Rabita, if you are out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Selamat pagi, Your Excellency. I hope you're enjoying your time in Jakarta. I'm from Indonesia right now. My name is Bita. I'd like to ask you a question in relation to your opinion about diplomacy from the perspective of law. So you also mentioned that you studied law, but your journey brings you elsewhere, and now you're here telling us amazing stories about your journey. But my question is that in law school, they teach us about international law and diplomatic law. And they also teach us the tricks of bilateral negotiations. But the problem is that the focus of bilateral negotiation that they've been teaching us is not so much in terms of diplomacy, but usually the negotiation that were taught to us are negotiations that are conducted for the sake of avoiding a future dispute. So before two states are going to an international legal proceeding, they have to do some sort of alternative dispute resolution, be it negotiation or mediation. So usually, from the perspective of international lawyers, we in many occasions we abandon the diplomatic aspect of the negotiation because the stake of the discussion is too high to the extent where we only care about maintaining our state's interest in order to avoid a conflict. So, have you ever been in that position? And if yes, how do you balance out the fact that there are some huge discussion at stake that you need to maintain? However, at the same time, you need to be diplomatic and somewhat not escalate the conflict with the other country that you're negotiating with. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, my friend, for that question. You know, answering that question would take another session or another course for us. As I have said before, I was Consul General in two places which are very important for overseas Filipinos. First was in the United Arab Emirates, in Abu Dhabi. Almost 500,000 Filipinos are there. And then also in Hong Kong, where there are also many Indonesians. So most of my work entailed bilateral discussions with the host government officials. Yes, just like lawyers, we avoid any conflict. We try to avoid it. It is a misconception that lawyers wanted conflicts so that they could uh, make a living out of it. No, we try as much as possible to avoid conflicts so that whenever we negotiate on something, we should always be prepared. Preparation amounts to a big factor to the success of a project. So it's also like diplomacy. I don't think there's a difference. As a diplomatic lawyer, I've been involved in many negotiations on binding agreements, not just ceremonial statements, but binding agreements to ensure that both parties would agree on something that would benefit both sides. So I've said this will require another session, and you can always contact me. You're here in Jakarta. Please feel free to contact me and in the mission, and if you can leave your contact information, we could I could meet your group and we could have more discussion about this. Also, if you're interested in the ASEAN Charter, I think lawyers should all in ASEAN should also know more about it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ambassador, for that. Thank you for being so open and sharing. Um, we have one last question before the session ends, and this is from Win from Myanmar. And he is asking how you would describe the differences between the theories that people learn in school and real life scenarios in the diplomatic world. So I guess for all these budding diplomats out there, the real question is how would you apply what you have been learning in school later on in their work life?
That is a good question because when I meet many students, they always think that diplomacy could be learned from the textbook. I have seen some schools prescribing some textbooks about diplomacy. But as I've said before, my favorite subject is diplomatic and consular practice. That is where we learn the practical side of diplomacy. There may be many theories, many doctrines, yeah? And that would be best discussed by political scientists or those studying other aspects of political science. But I would like to emphasize more on the practical side, which is my favorite subject. I've taught also international law. I thought about treaties formulation. I've thought about the different international and regional and organizations. And I would always emphasize that the theory may be there, they could be conceived, they could be written, they could be, how do you call this? thought of by some of our bright authors, but when it comes to practice, it's something different. So I hope that you could invite other practitioners. As you say in your talk, the title of your talk show, The Art of Diplomacy. Indeed, it is really an art which you could not just learn from textbooks. So to my friend from Myanmar, I hope that I have answered your question.
All right, thank you for that, Ambassador Noel. Again, thank you for being so open and so willing to share about your experiences. And I hope that everyone everyone was able to gather something from this talk session. Thank you everyone for attending this. And we will be meeting up again later for the second section with Mr. Lee Yong Gyung. As of now, Ambassador Noel, I would like to invite you to have a seat, to remain seated so that we can go into the breakout session for the photo taking.
Um, Madam MC, just before I end,
Yeah, sure.
I just allow me to share some lyrics. I'm not a
Of
singer, but
course.
I remember this. It's an old folk song, which reminded me about my life as a young diplomat. Do you know John Denver? I'm sure that the young people do not know John Denver. He passed away already, but he has a song entitled Calypso. If you look it at Google, just listen to it about Calypso. It says there, portion of the lyrics, it says here, to work in the service of life and the living, in search of the answers to questions unknown, to be part of the movement and part of the growing, part of beginning to understand. Actually, that those lines were even paraphrased in the movie, uh, in one of the Star Trek movies. And it says, to sail on a dream in the sun-fretted darkness, to soar through the starlight, frightened alone. So, my dear participants in this ASEAN model meetings, I hope that you have found something useful from what I have shared with you in the short time that we are interacting early this morning. Feel free to contact me if you still want to know more about my work, my life, and for those who are more interested, my family. And I will be glad to try to share them with you. Thank you to all of you.
All right, thank you, Ambassador, for that. I guess now we will wait for the photo taking session. Hello, delegates. I hope you can all hear me. Just a quick reminder from the organizers is that everyone is supposed to rename yourselves according to your groups, and the naming convention has been pinned on the screen for your reference. So just a quick reminder on that, yeah? Instead of using your names, use the groups that you have been assigned to. Thank you, delegates. All right. Welcome back, delegates. Good morning, everyone, and our distinguished guests as well. Today, we have our second talk show session on understanding ASEAN. And we are very pleased to have with us here today Mr. Lee Yung Yung. Mr. Lee is the Director for Community Affairs Directorate in the ASEAN Secretariat based in Jakarta, Indonesia. He manages the daily operation of the Community Relations Division and Information Resources Management Division. He has almost 2 decades of work experience in international relations, public policy, and economic development. Prior to his current position in the ASEAN Secretariat, Mr. Young was head of executive support in the Office of the Secretary General, where he provided the day-to-day technical and administrative support to the Secretary General of the ASEAN Secretariat. Besides the ASEAN Secretariat, his international experience included a 1-year appointment at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, based in Bangkok, Thailand, in 2011. Mr. Lee, a very warm welcome to you, and it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to this talk show online. With your extensive experience in different postings, I believe we are all looking forward to this session and your perspectives on the realities surrounding ASEAN. So without further ado, please, you may take the floor.
Thank you, Tashrin. Good morning, everybody. I cannot hear you, but I hope you can hear me. I cannot see you, and I hope you can see me. This is also my first time, just like Ambassador Noel. This is also probably my first time doing this on a big scale. Because usually this is my 4th or 5th of such a session. In the past, I can gauge the look of the audience, but this time around, I cannot gauge at all. So I just hope you can pretend to be attentive to my session and then try to listen, and then I will ask you questions at the end, and that will be also some marks to be allocated to your performance by ASEAN Foundation, actually. I wanted to thank AF for re-inviting me for this. I have about 60 over slides, but as a Singaporean, I can talk very fast, as you all may know. So in fact, I'm one of the fastest speakers in the Secretariat with the way I speak. Before I start, can I just hear from the Singaporeans? Can you all make some noise, please? Where are the Singaporeans out there?
Here, I'm Singaporean.
You're Singaporean, Ashwin. Oh, yeah. You're the only one or anybody else?
No, I'm sure there are others out there. Where are the Singaporeans? Okay. Maybe they're saying hello in the chat box.
Oh, like this, okay. Can I share my screen first, AF, please? I got some slides which I wanted to share, like I say. Wow, all the Singaporeans come back to me. Thank you. No, but some are Thai, some are Bruneians. Host disable participant screen sharing.
There is an option, Mr. Lee, to share your screen at the bottom. It's in green.
I know, I tried to press that, but they say host disable participant screen sharing.
Okay, so.
I think now okay already.
Okay, cool.
Cool. One. Okay, I hope everybody can see. All right, anyway, this is my name. My name may sound like a Korean to you, but I'm not, for sure. I'm a true blue Singaporean. Like I say, I speak fast. Please stop me anytime or stop through the facilitator or the moderator to stop me. Good morning to all. Thank you for inviting me here on a Saturday. I feel happy actually, even though it is a weekend. I feel happy to be here to talk to you because, as you all may know, youth is one of the biggest stakeholders in our ASEAN community building. I do not know how many of you have actually been to the Secretariat, ASEAN Secretariat. I'm not even sure whether the Indonesian students have been to the ASEAN Secretariat. But in any way, this is where we are. We are in the southern part of, we are in the South Jakarta. If you can see my cursor, this is the old building that was inaugurated back in 1981. And only last year we moved to this twin tower behind. So together, these three buildings are what we call the ASEAN premise. In front of us, there's an ASEAN MRT station. They literally name it ASEAN, the MRT station. And this is what they call the busway. So we are, because of the Indonesian government support, they are providing all these accessibility support to us, for our staff, for visitors, whenever they call on the Secretariat. If you cannot see from here, actually these two towers are linked by a sky bridge, which is the longest suspension bridge without middle support in Indonesia. It is indeed part of the Indonesian World Record Museum. We were given that award by them. So feel free to come to, when COVID is over, feel free to come over to Jakarta and call on me or call on Ambassador Noah as what he promised. So we can give you the access to visit and take some nice photo here. I think many of you already by now know what ASEAN is. I wouldn't want to go into it. Maybe just to reiterate, 8th of August is the day that we celebrate ASEAN Day, because 8th of August back in 1967 was the day we formed ASEAN. These are the 5 foreign ministers that actually signed the ASEAN Declaration or the Bangkok Declaration. I do not know how many of you know their name. I do hope that all of you know a bit of this. The Filipinos will probably know about Foreign Minister Narciso Ramos, the father of President Ramos, the ex-President Ramos, or rather. Pak Adam Malik of Indonesia, Kun Tanak Koman of Thailand, Abdul Razak of Malaysia, who is also the father of Tan Sri Najib, and S. Rajaratnam, Singapore. So these are the 5 wise men, we call them 5 founding fathers, that actually came together, formed the grouping called ASEAN. Like I say, you know by now 10 countries, but you may not know the exact date. And I thought this is a slide that is useful to you. These are the exact date that each of these countries joined. Brunei was the first to be part of the enlargement, the first enlargement exercise ASEAN has undertaken back in '84. And then 10 years later, followed by Vietnam, 95. Thereafter, we have Laos, Myanmar, and the last to join us was Cambodia, 30th of April, 99. We do anticipate Timor-Leste to join us because they are part of Southeast Asia. And that itself is part of the ASEAN Charter. All Southeast Asian nation has that right to be part of ASEAN. So Timor-Leste being the newly independent, the latest independent, I think they got their independence back in 99 as well. So they have that, what you call the eligibility to join, and we are making them currently an observer. There are some meanings to what we call the ASEAN emblem, just in case you do not know. Okay, again, this slide is purely for info. I think it is good if really you students want to be part of this ASEAN exercise, regional integration process, international relations awareness. I think this will be something useful for you. What does blue signify? White, red, yellow. So each of these, there is a meaning. But obviously, everybody know the 10 stalk of paddy here represent the 10 countries. And when Timor-Leste do join us one day, it will be 11 stalk of this paddy. Okay. We have 10 member states, and we also have 10 dialogue partners for easy coordinating purposes. Right at the top, 12 o'clock, we have Australia, Canada, all the way to 11 o'clock US. So again, this is easy coordinating purposes. One country be in charge of one dialogue partner. Beside the dialogue partners, we also have other external partners. We call them the sectorial dialogue partners, such as Norway, Pakistan, Switzerland, Turkey. We also have development partners that undertake certain collaboration with us, partnership with us in specific sectors or development areas. Chile, Germany are the two development partners. So in that sense, Germany is, sometimes they wear the double hat. They are part of EU, as we know, who is a dialogue partner. They themselves individually is a development partner. So these are the list of what we call ASEAN external partners for your awareness. Besides having all these mechanisms in place, we also have what we call the ACTCs, ASEAN committees in third countries, whereby, say in Australia, for example, in Canberra, the capital, where all 10 ASEAN member states have their embassies and high commission office. These 10, the 10 office representing each of the ASEAN member states, they come together and they are being termed the title of ACTC, so that they can actually work more closely with the Australian government, in this case in Canberra. So this is one mechanism that we also leverage on in terms of doing outreach, in terms of working closely with the world, ACTC. So in this, currently there are about 54 ASEAN ACTCs around the world, national capitals and all around the world. Yeah. If there's something that you really want to remember about ASEAN, please just remember that ASEAN is truly unique and diverse. Because if you look at how the region is, you have the mainland countries, Thailand and the CLMV countries. You have the peninsular countries like Malaysia and Singapore. You have the archipelagic countries, the island, the island-based countries like Indonesia and the Philippines. And you have Brunei, right in the middle of a big island called Kalimantan, or Borneo, sorry. So in that sense, ASEAN is very unique and diverse in terms of the geographical landscape, in terms of the political system. Brunei, as we know, is a monarchy. It's ruled by the Sultan. There are centralized economy like Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. Of course, Philippines, Indonesia, very democratic, very liberal. And then you have the, what we call the in-between, the rest, the Malaysia, the Singapore. But by and large, my point here is ASEAN is very diverse in terms of political landscape, political system, geographical landscape, and also even the people itself. Thailand, you have about, almost everybody is a Buddhist. The Philippines, 8 out of 10 are Christ follower. And then in Indonesia, the world's biggest Islamic nation. So very diverse, unlike some other groupings, which is a bit more homogeneous. ASEAN is very diverse in that sense. But together we are strong. Individually, we may be different, diverse, but together we are strong. Using the 2018 number, we have about 650 million people, which is sizable, very sizable. GDP 3 trillion coming together. And in that sense, it places us as the number 5th economy in the world, after the US, after China. I think in my lifetime, and I'm in my mid-40s, I think we can probably catch up with Germany. We may be able to catch up with, we may be able to catch up with Japan, but I do not think we can catch up with China or US. But by and large, the whole point here is ASEAN as a whole, it is a very strong, unique and combination of an outfit, because number 5 in the world. Individually, if you look at the individual countries, the highest performing country, Indonesia. Individually, Indonesia, the largest market in ASEAN, is only number 16 in the world. I know this time we talk about this exercise organized by AF. Australia is involved, +1. So Australia is number 14, Indonesia 16, Thailand, Singapore 25th, 34, right down the list. But only when we come together, we are really strong. 3 trillion, number 5 in the world. And always remember, Indonesia is the biggest market in this region. Out of 3 Southeast Asian, 1 is Indonesia. About 280. And every year, Indonesia produce 1 Singapore. 6 million babies are born in Indonesia every year. So just Indonesia itself alone, every year they produce 1 Singapore already. So you can probably think of the size, the potential of the biggest market in ASEAN, Indonesia. Of course, followed by the rest, the Philippines, the Vietnam, and what have you. I know so many, you have read so many things about ASEAN community building, ASEAN regional integration, very confusing for you. I just need you to remember 3 things in your life about ASEAN journey. These are the 5 milestone years. I just need you to remember these 5 milestone years. You probably can tell a very good story about ASEAN. 67, the year we were born, as I mentioned. 97, 30 years later, we try to achieve or move towards what we call the ASEAN Vision 2020, where we are building towards what we call a community or caring society, at the same time achieving what we call the partnership, bonding together, peace and stability. So 97, 30 years later, after the end of the Cold War, we wanted to see reinvent ourselves, if you want to put it that way, what are the roles that we can play. And by 2020, we thought we can achieve all this. 2003 in Bali Concord 2, under the stewardship of President Megawati Sukarno Putri, the leaders further build up what they think is the ASEAN community. That means the 3 pillars: political, security, economic, social, cultural. 2007 in Philippines, in Cebu, under President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, we fast-tracked what we call the Vision 2020 to 2015. And in KL, 2015, on the last day, we officially launched the community. So this is just the 5 milestone year that I need you to remember. In case you want to know what are the respective areas, again, this is just a quick glimpse of what it is. Under political security, obviously we talk about foreign ministry, defense, law, transnational crime, policing, defense cooperation. Economics, again, as the name implies, trade, investment, finance, ICT, tourism, and anything other than these 2 falls under social cultural. So social cultural, ASEAN ASCC, we call it, is the biggest of the community of all. It ranges and is so diversified from culture all the way to young people like youth. Though there is an update that science technology has been moved over to AEC, because science and tech, we thought it is a better combination together with ICT innovation under the economics. So this has been transferred over. But by and large, ASCC is still the biggest, what we call the community work under its orbit. Where I am, I'm part of the community outreach. So you can see I cut across all 3. I have to know a bit of everything. And this is why they put me to be the last speaker, to just wrap it up and to answer any question that you may have during the Q&A. Political security, again, I need you to just remember 2 things. You may have read a lot by now. Essentially, how do ASEAN member states live in peace with one another in an environment that is just, democratic, and harmonious? These are the 2 things I need you to remember. Economics, again, 2 things. ASEAN will be a single market and single production base to facilitate the free flow of these 5 items: the goods, the services, the investment, the capital, and the skilled labor. ASCC, again, another 2 things. How can we promote a community of caring societies and fostering of regional identity? And as I mentioned, this is the biggest pillar. This is what we call the people's pillar, because anything that concerns about human interests, people, women, young people like you, environment, falls under here. Okay. ASEAN Secretariat, For those who are role-playing ASEAN Secretariat, please remember your role. Our role is just to be the quiet servant. We are the salary worker. We work with the likes of Ambassador Noah, the Philippines, and other member states to go about bringing greater coordination, greater efficiency in the coordination of the respective ASEAN projects and activities. At the same time, we are the nerve center, working together with the other ASEAN organs. ASEAN Foundation is one good example. We work closely together with ASEAN Foundation, and that's why I'm invited here to talk to you. The boss of the ASEC is what we call the Secretary General, and currently he's a Bruneian. He's accorded the protocol and courtesy of a minister. Okay, essentially he's just like the CEO of a company, 5-year terms. So his term, excuse me, his term he has another 2 more years to go, to 2022. Anybody know how many Secretary Generals we have? Okay, I can't see your answer, but I guess they are about, since the first Secretary General of ASEAN, or those days they known it as the Secretary General of ASEAN Secretariat, until currently Datuk Lim, we have about 14. So Datuk Lim is the 14th ASEAN Secretary General. If you want to see this Russian doll, you can actually come to the ASEAN Gallery. Yeah? We have this. So this will give you a good indication of how they look like, the name, and where they are from. And the one before that was Ambassador Le Long Min. He's from Vietnam. So as you know by now, the next person to come on board will be a Cambodian. So we go by alphabetical order in terms of the Secretary Generalship. SecGen is assisted by the 4 DSGs, we call them, each undertaking one pillar. Currently, as it is, political security is helmed by Ambassador DSG Tuan from Vietnam. AEC is under the Philippines, Dr. Aladdin. ASCC Social Cultural under Cambodia, Mr. Kompuk. And this is my supervisor, Committee and Corporate Affairs, Indonesian. Unlike the SecGen, these DSGs are 3-year term. And that would make them what you call a deputy minister level because they are DSG. Out of these 4, 2 of them, APSC and ASCC, are country appointed, nationally appointed. And the other 2, AEC, Committee and Corporate Affairs, are openly recruited. So it means anybody that is eligible, we can apply. So this is how we organize ourselves. And the last thing I wanted to say is these 4 gentlemen or these 4 posts, together with SecGen, they should be all from different nationality, because this is to ensure transparency and impartiality in the ExCom. ExCom is the executive community within the secretariat, the highest decision-making body, ExCom. You have heard about the ASEAN Charter. I just need to repeat this casually. If you have not read this, please go to our website, download a copy of it. This is just a little green book that's codify our norms, rules, and values of being associated with ASEAN, whether you are the ASEAN member state or ASEAN citizen. And this book actually serves as a legal and institutional framework as we talk about achieving the ASEAN community. All right. Besides having ASEAN Charter to bind the region together, obviously, like I said earlier, we are different landscape. Connectivity is very important to us also. So physical connectivity such as airport, seaport are very important. Because if you look at ASEAN from Myanmar, the extreme end of Myanmar all the way to Jayapura, which is the extreme end of Indonesia on the other side, we are looking at about this land area, almost 4.5 million kilometers square. So this is even larger than Europe from left to right, and bigger, slightly, I think bigger than Australia as well. Okay, so, and bearing in mind, like I said, countries like Indonesia and Philippines, different countries, different islands, many islands. So growth, development, connectivity, logistic is an issue. And in a sense, ASEAN is always very keen to develop connectivity, whether it is airport or seaport. And in airport, I think many of you have fly this airline before, Air Asia. We allow them to use the ASEAN logo because they are today an ASEAN entity. All right. So I'm not here to do advertisement, but basically just to update you why we let airlines like Air Asia adopt the ASEAN logo, because they are part of our entity. They are being accredited to be an ASEAN entity. I mentioned about the importance of connectivity, airport, seaport, energy pipelines, infrastructures, roads. So these are things that we work closely, either bilaterally or multilaterally, with support from dialogue partners or with external partners. ADB, for example, pump a lot of money in the mainland ASEAN to undertake connectivity in terms of railway and roads, highway. The other thing to bind the region together, obviously, is through FTA, economic partnership. And you have heard about ASEP by now. ASEAN, together with the 6 dialogue partners, because each of them we have +1 FTA arrangement. The purpose is to bring all them together into form one mega FTA called ASEP. When this ASEP will cover 50% of the world population, almost, it's really that big, and 1/3 of the global population production and trade. Okay, where economy space are concerned, external economy space, ASEAN is really on the verge. It's always on the toes, constantly to look at how we can expand it. We have AEC, as you know. Each of the dialogue partners have their respective FTA arrangement with ASEAN, from China, Japan, Korea, India, Australia, New Zealand. We also have done one with Hong Kong as a special administrative region. Together we are ASEP. We are now, I think, processes has started as we look to working with Canada for a possible FTA. It's not yet concluded, but taking the baby steps now to explore the feasibility study. With US TIFA as well. With EU, maybe, I do not know, but it could be. Negotiations stopped in 2009. I haven't got any of the latest, but I think that is another potential partner that ASEAN is looking at to expand the what we call the external economic space. And then we have the defunct TPP, but I think half of ASEAN is in CPTPP. So no matter how you look at it, left, right, center, up, down, ASEAN is always in the thick of action as we talk about expanding our economic relation, external economic relation, external economic space. Having said that, ASEAN is not perfect. There's challenges involved, as you may know by now. And my role here today is just to probably give you some lights on what are the challenges. Basically, I can sum it up into 3 C's: the cohesiveness, the centrality, and also connectivity, as I mentioned, because we have many islands in this region. Connectivity is a problem. The other 2 C's are cohesiveness and centrality. What do I mean by cohesiveness? Things like regional identity is not fully pursued yet, not yet well embraced. And this is, I think, a big talking point yesterday as we talk about ASEAN identity. Centrality, as the name implies, how can we, under the ASEAN Community spirit, how can we narrow the development gap in the region? I took this from Financial Times in 2012, 8 years ago, where according to them, Singapore, Brunei are among the front runners, the advanced economy, leaving, obviously the newer countries, newer member states like CLMV are behind. I checked the World Bank recently. Again, the story is almost the same, the income level. So in that sense, we need to narrow the development gap because that is the whole purpose of ASEAN coming together to form a community. One issue probably to the businesses, as we understand, we are all trading in our respective national currency, from the Brunei dollar to the Vietnamese dong. Ease of doing business, according to the World Bank, you have Singapore that is very pro-business, environment, business environment, number 2 in the world. But not every, if you look across the region, basically everybody is still trying to match the same pro-environment that Singapore has cultivated. So I am not here to name or shame any member states, but these are facts. Doing business, because ease of doing business, it means you let businesses come in, investment, and that is the fastest way to create jobs for the people. So you can see the disparity in terms of ranking. Export of container, Singapore, given the infrastructure that it has, the port infrastructure, $460 US dollar per container. Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City, the biggest port, or Hai Phong, 610. Difference of 150. If you are the businesses, you are the investor, you are likely to go to Singapore to export your container. But that would mean a vicious cycle whereby the advance continue to be running ahead and advance while the rest are still trying to catch up. So I think you can appreciate the dilemma here. For a region like ASEAN, not big, but then we have 4 time zones. Eastern end of Indonesia, 1 hour, 2 hours ahead of Jakarta. And then Manila, Brunei, Bandar Seri Begawan, KL, Singapore, Bali, 1 hour ahead of Jakarta. The rest, Bangkok, Phnom Penh, Vientiane, Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh, same as Jakarta, as it is now, 7 hours plus 7. And then Myanmar is half an hour behind. So even within what we call a relatively small region like ASEAN, you have 4 different time zones. Of course, you will laugh about it, but then again, these are issues because you make it. I feel you make it difficult for investors to do business activities, trading, stock trading, shares, calling each other. I think a lot of you appreciate this power socket. Each country has different. Even this we cannot harmonize. Each country has their own power socket, 3 heads, 3 pins, round head. So these are fun facts, but then I just thought these are also interesting things for me to point out about some of these basic issues that we face. A lot of you may not know this, but in a live audience, I usually ask the audience, where is this? Okay, for your info, these two places are in Singapore. This is when the MRT break down. And then this is in Orchard Road, flooding due to climate change. And infrastructure spending is indeed another issue. Why? Because, as I say, even for an advanced economy like Singapore, no doubt Singapore is small, but even for an advanced economy like Singapore, there is a need to constantly upgrade the infrastructure. And according to the McKinsey Global Institute, Singapore, between 2016 and 2030, Singapore needs about 133 billion to upgrade its public infrastructure. So what more? We are talking about countries much bigger, like Indonesia, the Philippines, even Myanmar, Vietnam, the so-called less advanced economy. How are they going to raise the money? So I think, again, this is an issue, of course, to be dealt by the national government, but these are indeed issues because the world has changed, climate change, global warming. Half of ASEAN drive on this side, same as Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei. The other half drive on the other side. Again, you may not know much, but this is a cost to businesses because they have to change the truck at the border. They may have to change driver. They have to switch the container from one truck to another. All these are adding up to the cost of doing business. Internet, Wi-Fi, basic infrastructure today in this generation, considered by you, even among ASEAN, you have Singapore that is very fast, like a jaguar, and then the not so fast, like a frog, like a lizard, like a rhinoceros. Again, like I said, this is not to name and shame, but basically these are fun facts that I want to point out. Even among ASEAN, basic infrastructure such as Wi-Fi and internet speed, there is a big difference. Why is that important? Because ASEAN's digital population is growing every year. Okay. In the Philippines, for example, 9 hours on average, one Filipino spend almost 10 hours per day online. And the world and each day has 24 hours. No? Almost half of the day, the Filipino is spending time texting or playing games or whatever. So that's why we call Manila or Philippines the texting capital of the world. Gaming, some of them use Wi-Fi internets for gaming, obviously. These are things that your generation would appreciate. I don't really play games, but then these are things that you appreciate. And some even use it to date.
Mr.
Yes,
Lee,
so,
sorry. If I may interrupt you, we are actually running out of time. So
okay.
if you don't mind, we can go to the question and answers
Okay.
for the last bit. Sorry, so sorry to
Not
interrupt
at all,
you.
not at all, not at all.
Okay.
Okay.
So delegates, please send in your questions as soon as possible because we are running low on time. But maybe if I could start off because I don't have questions for me currently.
Just let me
Okay.
conclude with this. Can I just conclude with this? Why I'm
Okay,
here to
sure,
talk to
of course,
why I'm
go
here
ahead.
to talk to the young people, because it is one of them, you guys are the key stakeholder in the region. As simple as that. You are the future, as many people have told you. Okay, we have to start to get closer to the citizen ASEAN, because otherwise people think ASEAN is the wrong impression that it's being elite. It's not. We are still too far away from ASEAN youth. These are all from Jakarta Post. We have books publishing why young people are important to us. And as you know, some of the member states are really considered aging population. So on ASEAN, I think you heard from Nina yesterday, the ASEAN population, 1/3 are youth. And this number are expected to grow. So one way we thought of engaging the youth is when we want to come together to join bid for the World Cup football. So SG has recently met I think has a last interface with FIFA. And these are things that we hope to do to bring ASEAN closer to the people, especially the young people. Okay, actually this is my last slide. So yes, questions, thank you.
Okay. We have thank you for all of that.
Not
We
at all, not
have
at all.
one question from, I'm sorry, I can't see the name, but this is a question directed at you, and it's asking, how do you see ASEAN in the future, in the near future, rather, like perhaps in 10 years or even 20 years down the road? Like, what is your personal take on that?
I think ASEAN will continue to do what we are doing now. Maybe by then Timor-Leste has joined us, by then, maybe. We hope so, 11 members. But we will still continue to do what we are doing, in a sense, with still very much consensus building arrangement. We will continue to, definitely we will continue to integrate more. We hope, we don't see, at this point, we don't see ourselves quite as a union like the European, but we are more than an association, as the name implies, Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So I think we'll continue to work on integration in terms of community process building. But definitely we may enlarge by then. Yep.
Okay, I hope that answers your question to whoever posed that. And the next one, actually, even myself, I have the same question. So, do you think that in the future ASEAN will be formally institutionalized? Because we all know that right now ASEAN practices the policy of the principle, sorry, of non-interference. And I guess this question is more directed towards the idea of like whether ASEAN will become sort of not completely, but like similar to the European Union, perhaps. So what do you think about that?
For sure, ASEAN will move towards a more rules-based, because that is one of the principles, one of the principles of the ASEAN community building. Institutionalized, yeah, I could argue, rules-based, but like I say, I think the leaders does not envision an EU type of integration per se, a custom union per se, but each member states are still given that leeway under the ASEAN framework to undertake what they call the bilateral partnership or collaboration or whoever with the world. So ASEAN, yes, more rules-based, but at the same time, is also not really what you call the EU type of unionized arrangement. Yeah. So why do I think the informality fits ASEAN better? Yes, I would think so, because this has been what we have done for the last 53 years. Of course, things may change. We do not know how the world will become, but at this point of time, the agenda of becoming a EU is not there.
Mhm. Thank you.
I also saw a question. My name is Angel from Indonesia. In my opinion, what ASEAN can improve more? I think ASEAN can improve more by being a bit more, where businesses are concerned. I think ASEAN can do a bit more intra-ASEAN trading, for example. That is something we can take a leaf out of the European Union. We can trade more internally. We can invest more internally rather than, you know, because that would help a lot calm the next global economic downturn. But of course, ASEAN is not an inward-looking body. We will continue to stay open. We will not undertake any protectionism measures because ASEAN believes in engaging itself with the world, plug itself to the world economy. And then as for the others aspect, I think ASCC aspect, it will be, we want to do more towards achieving the the sustainable development goal. So these are areas ASEAN can definitely do more. Human development, invest in more, invest in people like you, the young people like you, so that you can be our ambassador also to go and round correcting the mindset of people who, the paradigm and the mindset of people who has a wrong idea about ASEAN. That's why ASEAN Foundation started this, for you to appreciate how decisions are made behind closed door in ASEAN, for you to undertake role play, what is ASEAN meeting like, so that you can better envision when you read in the newspaper, when the leaders hold hand, take photo, what is going on behind the scene. Okay, any other questions? No, there's no such thing as a silly questions. Any question is a good question. Wow, what is this? Manzata, from my perspective, ASEAN economy work in a colonized sense. I think deeper in the economic and political integration among the AMS will help change that. I do not know what you mean by colonize, but like I say, this is why I say ASEAN should start to invest more among ourselves also. At this point of time, yes, we still rely a lot on the major powers to invest. US is a big investment. China, a big trading partner with us as well. So yeah, in that sense, sure. We work closely with, that's why we call them the dialogue partners. I do not like the word colonizer. We are not colonizer. We are an entity and pride of our own. Okay, Mantaza.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I think that's all the time we have for questions. Sorry for that limited time slot.
No, I didn't know I overshot. Sorry.
No, it's all right. It's all right. It's fine. I think they learned a lot from your slides anyway.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Not at all. I earned my lunch. Thank you.
Okay. No, hold on for a while, Mr. Lee. Like I would just like to invite you for like a breakout session to take a photo. Yes, just before you
take
leave.
a photo.
Yes.
Yeah, no need. Okay, but anyway.
So just hold on for that.
Okay. Only 2 questions or 3 questions only. Everybody so well versed about ASEAN already. Okay.
I'm sure they have more.
Yeah, this is why some